Let us waste no time on introductions and dive straight into painting, starting with the iconic Saturnine shoulder pads. I began by creating a smooth transition from dark red to orange using a makeup sponge, a cheap and easy alternative to an airbrush. In order to build up semi-transparent layers which will blend into each other, your sponge has to be already damp before picking up any paint. For it, I just drop it into my water cup, squeeze out the excess and work the paint straight into it from the palette. By the time I reached the orange, the area I was looking to paint became a bit small, so I switched to the pointy side of the sponge for more precision. This tool can be limiting on smaller surfaces, but for big armor plates like this, you won't find any issues. Next came the cracked earth effect. There is not much to it but to just draw irregular shapes. But be careful not to make them too similar or evenly sized, as that would kill the look of lava rock we are after, a mistake I made on the left shoulder pad. For colors, I used a 50-50 mix of charcoal and dark red. But if you're trying to replicate this, I recommend leaning more into the red for your first layer, something like 3 parts red to 1 part charcoal. The idea is to create the illusion that the rock is hotter at the edges, so in hindsight my mix could have used more red. Then I used pure charcoal to paint a smaller shape inside the first one, and finished with an even smaller black shape to complete the transition. After framing the shoulder pads with their metallic trim, I set them aside and moved on to the body. There is no right way to paint this type of models. Whether you use an airbrush, sponge or regular brush, any tutorial you've seen on a Space Marine or Dreadnought will apply here. It is basically the same, just scaled up or down, so pick your preferred method. I went with the most approachable one using a sponge, which makes it easy to create both texture and visual noise on these broad surfaces, and avoid them ending up flat or boring. I stuck a bit of sponge to the back of a pencil to make a more comfortable tool, and since the model was already base coated in dark green, I didn't worry too much about the hard to reach areas, as they are always the last place the viewer's eyes will go. My main focus while working on this section of the model was to build up a high contrast from shadows to highlights, while at the same time working through several semi-transparent layers. Just like with the shoulder pads, this will help each layer blend nicely into the next one. I also added a rough edge highlight using the side of the brush, but I didn't worry if it was a little too thick. I just made sure it made the shapes stand out. As of now, things were looking a bit messy, so I mixed equal parts dark green and medium green thinned down to a washed consistency, and applied it evenly over all of the armor, not letting it pull in the recesses. This way creating a soft unifying filter that tied down all the tones together. As this filter was quite soft, I had to apply it 2 times. With the bulk of the armor done, I base coated the metallics and moved on to enhancing the shadows. As I often do when working with shadows, I used an oil wash mainly for 2 reasons. On one hand, it flows better into the recesses, and on the other, it can be cleaned up easily if something goes wrong. But feel free to use regular washes if that's what you're more comfortable with. While oil washes are easier to apply into the recesses only, I went for an all-over application, since my objective was to lightly stain the raised details and flat panels as well, which again helps unify the scheme. Black alone would have been too dull, so I mixed in a bit of brown to add a pinch of color to it. If you want to learn more about oil washes, you'll find the link in the description to my Oil Wash Masterclass, where I show you everything you need to know to get started with this technique. Here I am cleaning the excess oil from the raised surfaces using a makeup sponge. You could also use a Q-tip or eyeshadow applicator for more precision. But for a model this big, the sponge was enough, and due to its size, it can't get into the recesses as long as I don't press down, so the deposits of oil on the recesses remain safe from the cleanup. In order to achieve this state of cleaning and avoid the oil from being hard to remove or coming out too easily, you should wait around an hour to give it time to set a little. This time will vary from color to color, but it will still be far from dry and can easily be completely cleaned with the help of some white spirits. After letting the oils dry overnight, I glued the model together before tackling the final details. I waited until now to glue the model for 2 reasons. First, it gave me access to every nook and cranny, making the previous work easier so no area was left unpainted from any angles. Second, now I can focus the details on the areas that really matter, so nothing that's hard to reach or that ended up covered by the shoulder pads, for example. The first thing I worked on were some scratches on the armor. Having a light touch was key here to achieve thin lines, alongside diluting my paint to the point where it properly flowed out of my brush without me having to press down. So far, I had kept the brushwork to the minimum to make this tutorial as beginner-friendly as possible, but I do have an alternative using a sponge which I tend to use mostly when working over rust effects. I want to drag it to create scratches, which would be a pain to do with the brush, but takes seconds using the sponge. However, be careful. Just like with the chips, we don't want to push down too hard. Go slowly and don't panic if the paint doesn't seem to catch on the surface. Instead of pushing harder down, work new paint into the sponge. Remove the excess with some taps on the palette and try again, pressing down just a little. This is how you will get the thinnest scratches. If you'd like to see the rest of the video, it will also be linked in the description. For the plasma coils, I use my water trick technique. I first wet the surface with water and then apply an off-white colored wash. This wet-on-wet application helps the color run into the recesses more naturally, or more precisely like a pin wash. Then I dry brushed some blue-green to darken the raised details of the coils, while at the same time adding a subtle OSL effect where the color overspilled into their surroundings. Since this model is painted in Salamander chapter colors, a small flame freehand was a must. The trickiest part, which I did off camera for comfort, was the dark underpainting defining the shape of the flame. Because the armor had a complex tone built up through multiple layers, I couldn't just correct my mistakes with just one color, so I had to be extra careful not to mess up the flames, especially on the tips. Afterwards, I just had to fill in the flames with a red, orange, yellow transition, making the shape smaller as the colors became brighter. Painting freehands is something I've become less scared of as of late, and it is all thanks to taking the leap into practicing more often. When it came to me worrying about making a mistake and ruining the model, I just had to tell myself that they are something that can't be rushed, so as long as I was willing to put the time into them, I wasn't gonna ruin the model. For the base, I kept things simple, with a black-brown base coat followed by a pair of dry brushes of grey and white. But to make it a bit more interesting, I dusted the base with pigments, making sure to get some on the feet to help tie the model into the environment. I even added a pinch of green to this ruined city environment just to see how it would come out. Maybe not the best decision, but someone had to try it out so you don't have to. Finally, just like in my Iron Warriors tutorial from last week, I applied a final ultra thin oil wash using both brown and red oxide. This wasn't meant to simulate rust or anything like that, but to add a subtle chromatic variation here and there to break symmetry. Unlike the previous wash, this one was extra thin so it would dry faintly, and wouldn't create a big impact on the model, just giving us that subtle hint of color to make the overall look richer color-wise. The reddish tone not only enriches the gold, but creates some very nice contrast against the green, and I wasn't afraid to add some of it over the armor also. With the final wash dry, the model received a light coat of varnish, not so much for protection, but to unify the finish overall. If you reached this point in the video, I want to thank you for watching all the way till the end. I hope that you got something useful out of it that can help you with your hobby. I do have a couple more Heresy models in my backlog I'd like to paint, so if you want to see me do a Legion in particular, please comment down below, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.